Hi folks, welcome back to the B29 restoration project. So today's project is we're going to get some elevator linkages made up here for the elevators. I've already designed and cut out these G10. G10 is just a fiberglass plate. Cut out these horns out of that. This is 3/32, so 0.93, which is about 2.5 millimeters, something like that. And we're going to prep it to get ready to high saw these into the elevators. So a couple of ways I go about figuring out how I want to do this. It doesn't matter if it's a wooden structure or if it's a composite. If you don't have the slots and those horns pre-installed, it's honestly not too hard of a way to figure out how to do it. So first thing is I come out here with some masking tape, and I masking tape the area where the horn's going to be. In this instance, I got a couple of balsa wood blocks, and I put the back edge of this piece of masking tape here, right on the edge of those blocks. And then I'm also going to transfer the edges of it just by using my fingernail here to mark the edges of those blocks. So we know this whole area here is where we have balsa wood blocks that we can go in. Next thing I want to do is I want my ball link pivot here to be centered along the hinge line. I already know from the CAD work that the hinge line is 1 inch aft of this trailing edge of the spar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ruler here, I'm going to put it on the trailing edge of the horizontal stabilizer. I'm going to make sure the elevator is in the neutral position, and then I'm going to make a mark at 1 inch in 2 places. And then I'm going to draw a horizontal line, and this will be the center line of the elevator hinge. So fairly easy there. Next thing I want to do is I want to mark where the front edge of these tabs that go inside of it are in relation to the center line of the pivot. I already know from the CAD work that this bolt center line is 1/4 inch in front of the this tab. So that line that we just drew, where the hinge line is, we're going to come back to there, roughly 1/4 inch. Doesn't have to be 100% precise, just pretty close. And then we're also going to draw another line with our Sharpie here. So that gets us our hinge line, and then that gets us our trim line. So just so I don't mess up, I'm going to put HL here on that forward line for hinge line. Next thing I'm going to do is I am going to use my ruler, and I am going to draw a line parallel to the edge of the servo case that your arm is going to be sticking out on. So here you can see we've got the arm sticking outwards, out towards the tip of the surface. I've got my ruler, and this edge here is parallel. It's actually right up against this case of the servo. This is your servo side. So what you want to do is you want to draw your line where your linkage, your servo and control linkage setup. You want to draw it right here on this side, and that should theoretically, if your hole in your arm is just so happens to be in the same position as your ruler, which mine is, that would be the center line of our ball link for the elevator side. So when I designed these originally, I expected to be using a long arm like I have, but I expected it to be the link or the connection point on the arm to be a little bit further out. I really don't need it any further out than what it is. So because of that, my balsa wood blocks are actually too far shifted outwards, and they should have been shifted in between 2 ribs instead of straddling 1 rib. So I'm going to actually have, instead of my linkage being perfectly 90 degrees to the hinge line, it's going to be skewed a little bit. But it kind of is what it is at this point. So because if you were to take our control horn here, or setup, or control horn linkage, you'll see that this tab is actually on our edge of our block here. The inside surface of this tab is actually outside of where our block ends. So what I'm actually having to do is I'm having to move it over just a little bit. Actually, I'm taking the inside surface of this inner tab and I'm putting it on the center line, so our linkage is kind of skewed outwards just a little bit. So now that we've got that figured out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my control horn setup here and I'm going to place it on top of the surface. I'm going to put the forward edge of the tabs right where that line is that we drew earlier. That way we know that our center line of our bolt is in the correct place. And then I'm just going to trace around the other tabs. So now we've got a couple of boxes, one here and one here, just a couple of rectangles. That will be where we trim out using our Dremel tools. A couple of things that I like to use is I buy these 16th inch end mill bits. These are actually made for like CNC routing, wood, and G10 and whatnot. These work really, really well for cutting pretty much anything. It's probably one of my most used tools. I buy these and I think there's a couple places on eBay you can get used, like lightly used ones, a case of 25 for like 30 bucks or whatever. These are 16th inch diameter, so working like a little cordless Dremel, it works really, really well. So, and then the other one I use is a couple of these. This is just an 1/8 inch rotary file. I think this one's actually intended for metal, but it works really well for wood. And then you can get stuff like perma-grit tools, rotary tools, or whatnot. So anyways, back to work. I'm going to take our Dremel tool here, and I'm just going to clean out inside of these two rectangular boxes. So I've taken the Dremel tool and that end mill bit, and I went as far deep as I could possibly get it. And take our horns here, and we're going to see if they fit, which they don't, which is not surprising. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 1/8 inch rotary file, and I'm going to use that to increase the width of it and then also increase the depth. Alright, so now we use that rotary file and we're going to test fit things here. And they fit fairly tight. We got a little bit more filing here on the back side to do. All right, there we go. Now we got it to where it will sit flush against our surface, which is why we have these little notches here. This is actually kind of a depth locator to where I make sure that they don't go any deeper than they need to. So these are pretty much ready to be high sawed into the surface now. Before I get going into that, I'm actually going to go sawed into the surface now. Before I get going into that, I'm actually going to go ahead and set up the rest of the push rod, and then this push rod will get covered with a carbon fiber tube, just as kind of one to cover up the threaded look, and also to just more or less just make it nicer looking, and also to a little bit of extra rigidity and stiffness. The hardware for this is actually all 632. Since we're just doing one elevator servo, figured we would upsize the linkages a little bit as well on the elevator mixing stick. Another thing you probably didn't notice, because I'm going to speed this up or sped it up, I don't go straight in and just go back and forth. I actually take the Dremel tool and I kind of, if this is your slot, I kind of tilt it a little bit. And the reason why I tilt it in that slot is so you kind of make a wedge shape. So you get your horn where it sticks out at the top of the surface, and then you've got almost like a wedge shape like this, and then your horn is sticking up here. That way it's less likely to pull out because you have a wider glue area at the bottom than up here at the top where the slot is. That way you get a lot of glue down here. It creates a nice stable platform, and trying to pull a wedge out of anything is going to be harder than just trying to pull a straight slot out. So that's why I do the wedge. But yeah, that's pretty much locating and cutting slots out of a wooden or composite surface, it's pretty much all the same process. I really got lucky in the fact that my ruler was wide enough to basically be the center line of my linkage. Another thing you can do, like I showed you earlier when I messed up, you draw your line here, and then you can measure from the side of your servo case to where you want your linkage to be, and then you can just make a mark either side of this and then draw a line, and then you can locate your push rod there centered if you need it, if that's how you want your push rod to be, if you want it to be centered off to the side or whatnot. So that's pretty much it on this one.